condemns the statements by U.S. State Department and French Foreign Ministry describing them as blatant violation of United Nations principles. Syrian Arab Army broadens its battle against terrorism and intensifies its blows against terrorists. Iraqi army eliminates dozens of ISIS terrorists in Al-Anbar and Salah ad-Din. UNESCO welcomes UN Security Council Resolution 2199 on cutting off funding terrorist organizations. Good afternoon. Syria strongly condemned the statements issued by the U.S. and French foreign ministries on Syria as a blatant violation of UN principles on respecting the sovereignty of states and non-interference in their internal affairs. An official source at the ministry stressed that the U.S. and French ministries' statements prove once again the two states' alliance with the armed terrorist groups, as they constitute an attempt to raise terrorist groups' morale after the successive defeats they are facing by the Syrian Arab Army. Marking the 33rd anniversary of the open strike declared in the occupied Golan, the Syrian people in the occupied Golan issued a statement in which they affirmed their determination to press ahead with their struggle against the Zionist enemy. The statement renewed the people's adherence to their motherland, Syria, and their rejection of all racist measures taken by the occupation authorities. They expressed complete support of the Syrian people in its battle against Takfiri terrorism.
People of the occupied Syrian Golan commemorated the 33rd anniversary of the open strike announced in 1982 against the Israeli occupation authorities and their decision to annex the Golan and impose Israeli laws and identity on its Syrian citizens. Qunaitera Governorate organized a festival to mark the anniversary that drew large audience from the people of Golan. Qunaitera Governor stressed that Golan will always be an integral part of Syria, adding that the Golan citizens are confident in the inevitable end of the occupation. The anniversary this year comes against the backdrop of successive military wins that the Syrian Arab Army is scoring on the environs of the Golan, which the governor viewed as a precursor to the ultimate victory over the occupation.
Syrian Arab Army intensified its blows against the terrorist hideouts, inflicting heavy casualties among them in Daraa's countryside. A military source said that the Syrian Arab Army unit eliminated a number of terrorists and destroyed their vehicles, killing all inside in the village of Aqraba, 48 kilometers northeast of Daraa, which is suffering a systematic terrorism by mercenaries funded by foreign parties. The source added that another Syrian Arab Army unit increased its military operations against the terrorist groups, killing many of them and injuring others in Tel Antar on the triangle of Deir el-Adas, Kfr Nasij and Kfr Shams. The source asserted that the army targeted the gatherings and hideouts of the terrorists, killing many of them and injuring others in the district of Khirbet Ghazal and Al-Ahrak city, northeast of the governorate. In Qunaitera's countryside, Syrian Arab Army units pounded several hideouts of Takfiri terrorist groups that commit atrocities against the citizens and the infrastructure, supported and in direct coordination with the Israeli occupation. A military source said that the army units conducted intensive intensive operations destroying the terrorist gatherings and hideouts in Rasm al-Askari and Rusum Khamis in the environs of Bir Ajam village, 18 kilometers southeast of Qunaitera. Syrian Arab Army units also eliminated many terrorists and targeted their gatherings in the vicinity of the main square and Naba al-Sakhar roundabout, as well as in the villages of Al-Msherfe, Batina, and near Tel Mashara and Al-Rawadi area. In Hom's eastern countryside, a Syrian Arab Army unit destroyed a vehicle loaded with more than 2 tons of explosives on the axis of Nuh al-Tafha in the area of Jebel Jarrah. The vehicle was heading to Homs. In Aleppo, the athletes organized a protest against the terrorism which targeted the athletes in Al-Jala club and the trainer of the youth team, Noor Aslo. The protesters asserted that the sportsmen and women would remain sincere to their oath of loyalty to their country, Syria, vowing to exert their utmost effort to win regional and international championships. Iraqi armed forces maintained full control over al-Baghdadi district and expelled the terrorist groups there, which tried to take over the area and the Ain al-Assad air base. A source in the military command in Al-Anbar said that the forces, in cooperation with special and counter-terrorism units, were able to maintain control of al-Baghdadi area west of Al-Anbar. UNESCO welcomed the adoption of the new UN Security Council Resolution 2199 last Thursday on cutting off funding terrorist organizations and taking legally binding measures to counter illicit trafficking of antiquities from Iraq and Syria. UNESCO affirmed that the adoption of this resolution is a milestone for enhanced protection of cultural heritage in Iraq and Syria. It is also a clear recognition that the destruction and trafficking of cultural heritage are more than a cultural tragedy. It is also a security and political imperative to be taken into account the all peace efforts. UNESCO added that the pillage of Iraq and Syria's culture has reached an unprecedented scale since it fuels conflicts by providing revenues for armed groups and terrorists. This resolution acknowledges that cultural heritage stands on the front line of conflicts today, and it should be placed at the front line of security and political response to the crisis. Earlier, Syria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Dr. Bashar al-Jafari, in a joint press conference with Iraq's permanent representative to the UN following the adoption of the UN's Resolution 2199, said that Syria welcomes the resolution and it highly praises the initiative of the Russian and Chinese delegations to the United Nations in this respect, calling upon the US to be the first who implements this resolution so that its claim of combating terrorism be credible. He further added that the Turkish regime shoulders the main responsibility in infiltration of terrorists to Syria and Iraq, and that the same applies to Jordan, unfortunately, Mr. al-Jafari concluded.
Is the most comprehensive resolution aiming at combating terrorism, in particular the terrorism perpetrated by the gangs of Daesh and Jabhat al-Nusra. Syria welcomes the adoption of the Security Council Resolution 2199, as Iraq did, and highly appreciates the initiative of the Russian Federations and the Chinese delegation in their efforts in this regard. This resolution complements important aspects that have not been sufficiently focused on in the previous Security Council resolutions concerning combating terrorism. Resolution 2199 imposes strong and clear commitments on all the states supporting terrorism in both Syria and Iraq, and those commitments are related specifically to oil trade, gas trade, trafficking in cultural heritage items, in addition to preventing terrorist organizations from acquiring manpads.
With this, we conclude our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more details about Syria and the region, and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. Now to latest business and market news with Serena, but after a short break. Ministries on Syria as a blatant violation of UN principles on respecting the sovereignty of states and non-interference in their internal affairs. An official source at the ministry stressed that the US and French ministries' statements prove once again the two states' alliance with the armed terrorist groups as they constitute UNESCO welcomes UN Security Council Resolution 2199 on cutting off funding terrorist organizations. Good afternoon. Syria strongly condemned the statements issued by the US and French foreign ministers. Syria condemns the statements by US State Department and French Foreign Ministry, describing them as blatant violation of United Nations principles. Syrian Arab Army broadens its battle against terrorism and intensifies its blows against terrorists. Iraqi army eliminates dozens of ISIS terrorists in Al-Anbar and Salah ad-Din.